Hello everybody, today I want to discuss a tragic incident regarding school shooting that took place in a small town in BC, Canada, and explore the psychological mechanisms that can help us understand how events like these unfold. When something like the tragedy in Tumbler Ridge happens, people immediately ask, how does someone get to that point? We'll never fully understand what was going through that individual's mind, and it would be irresponsible to pretend we do. But psychology and neuroscience gives us frameworks to understand how patterns, when combined and left unaddressed, can escalate. This video is not about excusing violence, it is about understanding the risk mechanisms. Before we talk about the brain, we need to zoom out. It's important to understand that the individual involved in the shoot was part of the LGBTQ community, and research consistently shows that individuals in marginalized communities experience higher rates of depression, anxiety, and chronic social stress. For example, research by Reisner and colleagues published in the Lancet Psychiatry in 2016 found that elevated rates of mood and anxiety disorders among transgender individuals was largely linked to experiences of stigma and discrimination. This aligns with the minority stress theory proposed by Ian Mayer in 2003, which explains how chronic exposure to social rejection and prejudice also creates sustained psychological strain. Now, it is important to be clear, mental health struggles do not cause violence. The overwhelming majority of individuals experiencing depression, anxiety, or minority stress never harm anyone. However, chronic psychological stress does shape how the brain processes pain and threat, and this is where neuroscience becomes relevant. When stress becomes chronic, the brain can begin operating in survival mode rather than the reflective mode. Now, let's talk about what this leads to in the brain. One of the most important discoveries in social neuroscience comes from the research by Naomi Eisenberger, published in Psychosomatic Medicine in 2012. Using brain imaging, her team found that when people experience social rejection, regions involved in physical pain, particularly the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex and the anterior insula, become active. Similarly, Ethan Cross and colleagues in 2011 demonstrated overlapping neutral activation between intense social rejection and physical pain. This suggests that repeated experiences of exclusion or humiliation are not just emotionally uncomfortable, they are neurologically processed as threat or physical pain. If someone experiences this repeatedly over time, these pain systems become more reactive. The world can begin to feel hostile rather than neutral. When someone repeatedly experiences rejection or humiliation, those events often become mentally replayed. They may begin questioning why it keeps happening or focusing on perceived injustice. Psychologist Craig Anderson's general aggression model, published in 2002 in the Annual Review of Psychology, explains how personal stressors, emotions, and thoughts interact to influence behavior. A key process in this model is rumination, repeatedly dwelling on distressing experiences. Research by Denson and colleague in 2012 also found that angry rumination sustains activation in emotional regions like the amygdala while engaging cognitive systems involved in evaluation. The more anger is mentally rehearsed, the more accessible aggressive thoughts become. Over time, this can shape perception. Neutral situations may feel intentional, and ambiguous cues may be interpreted as hostile. When the cycle repeats, the brain adapts. Through neuroplasticity, frequently activated emotional circuits strengthen. Threat detection systems can become more sensitive, while regulatory systems may struggle to keep pace. At this point, the balance between emotion and impulse control become increasingly fragile. The amygdala plays a central role in detecting threats and generating emotional responses. The prefrontal cortex helps evaluate consequences and inhibit impulsive reactions. When someone is caught in prolonged rumination, emotional circuits remain highly active. Sustained emotional arousal can tax regulatory system in the prefrontal cortex, making reflective control harder to maintain. For example, research by Kakero and colleagues in biological psychiatry in 2007 found that individuals prone to impulsive aggression showed heightened amygdala responses to perceived social threat. This illustrates how when threat systems are highly reactive, regulation becomes more difficult. When the amygdala is strongly activated and the prefrontal regulation is strained, emotional reactions can override long-term reasoning, and this is exactly what happened in this case. We cannot and should not speculate about the specific inner world of any individual involved in tragedy, but research shows that if individual is already in chronic psychological pain, repeatedly replaying grievances and perceiving heightened threat, their regulatory system may struggle to override intense impulses. Understanding these systems do not excuse violence. It gives us something more important, like insight into risk factors, early warning signs, and the need for intervention before pain turns into harm. The brain is plastic, which means that patterns can escalate, but they can also be interrupted. And this, my friends, is where prevention begins. If you watched till the end, I hope you enjoyed it. Please like and subscribe. Let me know in the comments if you enjoyed and would like more of these videos in the future. Thank you.